Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're watching us from. I'm very happy to begin the third in our monthly Irish Unity webinar series with our guest author Ben Collins today. So I just want to thank you, Ben, for joining us and kind of give a little bit of a context for these calls. We've begun these Unity education webinar series 3 months ago to help everyone get a better understanding of this historic moment we are in and a clearer sense of the role we can all play. There are many factors, angles, and perspectives in the current Irish Unity conversation, not to mention decades and centuries of history, and it can feel overwhelming at times to catch up or learn about any one aspect of it all. We're not going to be able to catch everybody up on all of the dates and times and places, but it's our hope that by setting aside time once a month to dig in, to understand a key element of the conversation, we can use that knowledge to inspire action. My name is Greg O'Loughlin. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Sinn Féin here in the States. And I'm very happy to welcome our guest today, author Ben Collins. I'll give a brief introduction, and then I'll ask you to cover up anything I may have left out. If I left there. Ben grew up in a strongly pro-unionist and pro-British background in East Belfast. Was previously an active member of the UK Conservative Party in Scotland from 2001 to 2003, and then a campaigner for the Alliance Party in Northern Ireland. He's no longer a member of any political party. Ben's a former chief executive of the Northern Ireland Federation of Housing Association and has worked in roles with a strong focus on political communication for more than 20 years. This has included work as a press officer for the Northern Ireland office at the time of the St. Andrews Agreement negotiations, for 3 international communications consultancies, a professional body, and a medical regulator. He resides in Belfast, working across the island of Ireland. He's a director with Chambré, an independent strategic communications and public affairs agency. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Greg, for the opportunity. It's great to speak with you.
Did I leave anything out there that we think could be important for folks to know?
No. I think that's more than enough.
All right, that's great. So I guess hearing your background and hearing where you came up with growing up in a pro-unionist background, it would be great to learn a little bit about your journey to recognizing unity as a viable and important path forward. Can you share a little bit about maybe the moment that it became clear to you, or the journey you took? Was there something that happened that made that penny drop for you?
Well, I guess I grew up, as you say, very much in a pro-unionist and pro-British background here in East Belfast, but I had always felt Irish in addition to being British.
Yeah.
And really, it was the Good Friday Agreement. Prior to the Good Friday Agreement, I was determined that I wasn't going to be forced into United Ireland by violence or threats of violence. But the Good Friday Agreement changed all that and allowed me to look at things anew. So it was a combination of, I went off to university in Scotland in 1994, just before the first IRA ceasefire. I went off at September, and I came back in December, and it was after the first ceasefire. And I remember it really struck me just a completely different atmosphere there was in Belfast just in those few months, because we had that first ceasefire and a real sense of hope. And that was great. But living in Scotland allowed me to really explore and embrace my Irish identity in a way that I just wasn't able to, particularly during the Troubles. So it was very much a sort of a gradual process. And I very quickly, I'm always been an idealist, but I very quickly was attracted to the idea about reunifying our island. I hadn't studied Irish history at school. I went to school, Campbell College in East Belfast, which is a very good school and so on, but didn't get to study. Learned a lot about medieval European monarchs, which wasn't really that useful. So it was just great to be able to understand Irish history, have peace, look at things anew. And really, it was over the coming couple of decades. I lived and worked in Edinburgh, Cardiff, and London, and then Dublin. But was living and working in Britain made me feel more Irish and less British. And I don't mean that in any negative way, but it just, everyone considered you to be Irish, and I considered myself to be Irish, and it was good. And it was also, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way to our unionist brothers and sisters, and I say that as somebody who has 2 unionist brothers, but and also this sort of realization that the whole attachment to Britain, the sense of Britishness, it's a mirage in many ways. It doesn't, what people in the North think of as being British, that's not something that most majority of people who actually live in Britain would think.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a fascinating observation to to recognize, I guess, in the reflection, recognize your
Yeah.
Irishness in the reflection of your experiences around. So it sounds as though your personal journey over, multiple instances of
Yeah.
kind of interacting over identities and different jobs. Can you share right now, or it's an exciting day with the presidential elections coming in as we're recording this. Can you kind of see from where we are now what the steps are from here to there? What does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, and I suppose the other two things that whenever I was in Scotland, it was back in about 2003, just at the time I was leaving the Scottish Conservative Party. Um, they, after a strange couple of years, but I won't, I won't go into that. But I think it was hearing the Scottish National Party, who wants Scottish independence, talking in 2003 about wanting to have fiscal autonomy and more control over their affairs. That really
Yeah,
resonated with me. And then going forward to the Scottish independence referendum in
yeah,
2014, that was a
yeah,
clear sign that things were changing. And then the Brexit referendum obviously was huge, because those of us in the north, we didn't vote for it. We very much want to be part of the European Union.
yeah.
And so I think going forward from now on, we see an increasing prospect of Nigel Farage, the
Mm,
leader of the Reform Party, who is very much pro-Brexit and is essentially an English nationalist, as well as being a far-right politician.
yeah.
And across the political spectrum, the vast majority of people in the north do not want to have him as prime minister. So I
Hmm.
think the timescale is going to be between now and 2029, whenever we have likely to have the next Westminster election,
I see.
and also we're likely to have the next elections to the Dáil, where I think there could well be change, particularly on the back of the coalition of the left that we've seen in the
Yeah,
presidential elections. That provides a template that could lead a way forward. So I think we are also, there's an opinion poll that was just published by Lucid Talk for the
yeah,
Belfast Telegraph, which showed that the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland, the north, want to see want to know what the criteria is for the border poll,
yeah.
and I think that's going to be key. I think it's going to be increasingly hard for the Labour government to say that they're not willing to share that detail, because they talk. We've heard different people from within the British government talking about the UK as a voluntary union. How can it be a
Yeah.
voluntary union if they can't tell you how you can leave? And the thing that I
Right.
find deeply frustrating is, and I say this as somebody, I worked in the Northern Ireland office as a press officer at the time of the St Andrews agreement discussions. Whenever you have the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, who is the British government representative in the north, saying we are nowhere near close to a border poll, those conditions haven't been met. How can he say that? What are the criteria that he's using to make that judgment?
That's right.
Tell us what they are, and then we've got something to work towards, because democracy demands that we need to have transparency and assuredness on that. But I think this is part of all the wider conversation. Nobody should have anything to fear about a conversation about our future. How do we deliver better healthcare? How do we deliver better education, better economy? How do we address the climate crisis?
Yeah.
All those kind of things. And for me, it's not just about identity; it's also about quality of life. Bill Clinton in 1992 in his election campaign said it's the economy stupid, and I
Yeah.
think right now we need to be saying it's quality of life stupid, because
Yeah.
that's what really counts. And for me, it's not just about identity. I totally get reclaiming the fourth green field, bringing the six counties of the north back into in with the rest of Ireland. That's hugely important. But it's also about so many different metrics, as I set out in my book.
Yeah.
We do so much better. Do so much better in the south than do in the north.
Yeah. Sorry, I think it just get um
Yeah.
pause there just for a second. So let me um see if that works here. All right. All right. Is that still there?
Yep. Still here.
Excellent. Yeah, sorry for that, the lag. There's a connectivity issue there. So that is a so I'm eager to jump into your book. As you said, there you have identified a lot of the different ways that point to the quality of life as being a pretty useful way to say, instead of saying it's the economy stupid, but there is the aspirational goal of United Ireland, and also a very material day-to-day kitchen table impact that can occur with it. And I wanted to just pause it because you raised that, and it's a common conversation around the ways in which the Brexit referendums were handled, and then the outfalling of the ways in which the lack of planning did hurt kitchen tables and small businesses and people in ways that were very surprising and very real. And I also, if you have a moment to weigh in on or share a little bit, because you do have a unique set of experiences with the Scottish push for independence, and that's not something that we have talked about on these webinars a lot. Can you describe a little bit about in what ways there were similarities to the push for Irish unification and Scottish independence that you see, that you maybe have observed or saw as part of that, the run up to that, and then maybe lessons that could have been learned from, and that's a curveball. I should
No,
apologize
that's all
ahead of
right.
time
No, that's
for throwing one there. Yeah.
no, I think that's absolutely fine. I think the similarities are that Scottish independence was about reclaiming your national destiny. And I don't mean that in any grandiose way. I mean that in a hard-headed sense. It's about being able to control your own affairs.
Yeah.
The state of the UK, as it's called, is very much it's still centralised. We may have legislatures in Scotland, Wales, in the north, and in the London Assembly and various mayoralties across England. But the fact is, the vast majority of the financial powers and control is still held in London. That
Yeah.
may have worked during the time of the British Empire, and whether you think the British Empire is a good or bad thing is a separate discussion we won't get into
Separate
today.
altogether. Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly right.
but I think in terms of Scottish independence, it was very much about wanting to have that control, because it is only London and the southeast of England. Those are the only two regions within what is the UK of Britain in the north that actually has economic growth. Every other place in the UK struggles to have economic growth, and that's because London is this sort of centrifugal force that really draws things in. Now we're
Yeah.
starting to see, with the Windsor Framework Agreements post Brexit, we're seeing an increasing amount of north-south trade here across Ireland, which is good, and we're seeing a lessening of trade between Britain and Ireland, which we don't want to see. But at the end of the day, they made the decision to vote for Brexit, and Brexit is all about putting in barriers. It's about putting in borders. It's about breaking the link between Britain and the European economy, which is the largest economy and the economy on the doorstep, which is crazy, I think, in many ways. But I think the similarities are that, of course, the point in time the Scottish independence referendum was held, you had the UK government saying, if you vote for independence, that's going to kick you out of the EU. And I think that forced a lot of people to vote against independence, even though they were, supportive of the idea in theory. But now they, like the North, have been pulled out of the EU against their will. So the only way they can get back into the EU is through independence, because the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Reform Party, the three biggest parties, they are not going to contemplate rejoining the EU anytime over the next decades, I don't think. So that's what. But I think the key thing from Scotland is they did try to frame the discussion about equality of life. And I think that's key. Maybe, and this is an observation that's maybe a little bit harsh, but I think the more you can prepare people in advance and sort of say, look, these are going to be a bit tough, but we're trying to unpick problems which have been instituted through, in our case, 100 years of partition. In Scotland's case, they've been part of the the Union of England and Scotland for 300 years. So that's sort of like taking their ability to control their own affairs away, and that's going to take time to unpick.
Yeah, layer on layer on layer of traditions, of habits, of just things that you're not even aware of that need to be addressed in that way. So I think I appreciate you shining a light into that part of it, because I think there's a lot to be learned from that experience, and from, as you said, the ways in which perhaps connection to the larger European market was manipulated to achieve an outcome, and is now being done again. But it would be good to, I think, dip into your latest book. You've just published a book called the Irish Unity Dividend. An excellent read, and I am really grateful and know how busy an author is just in the weeks after a new book. So it means a lot to us that you can spend time with us. I will plug it and let folks know that in the States, our viewers in the States, this is easily available in the States through Barnes & Noble, is where I was able to find a copy, and I recommend our viewers pick up a copy and dig in. In the book, you really provide insight and detail into a large number of sectors, and you break it up in a very helpful manner to say, well, what does this look like, and what are the benefits to be gained from potential for unity in healthcare and in education and in infrastructure? Really well laid out. So thank you as a learner myself, eager to learn about these details. It was a very helpful read. I personally have a strong background in education and was particularly intrigued by the ways in which you teased out and highlighted the discrepancies and the incredible gaps in this current state of affairs in education, North versus South, and what is the potential to be gained by unity. I'm intrigued by that one. Is there a chapter in particular that you are eager to share or talk about? And I'm not asking to pick a favorite, but what is something that you know?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, education is absolutely key. We have really low levels of educational attainment in the north compared to the south, and I
Yeah,
mean, our young people are the future. We live in a rapidly changing world, and the only way that we can stay connected, the only way that we can have economic opportunities is by being well educated. So I think that's absolutely key. You look at people in the Republic, they have the highest levels of education in Europe, and one of the highest levels in the world for things like maths and English and so on, but also in terms of education beyond high school equivalent. And
yeah,
I think that's hugely important. There's far too many people, particularly my own area of East Belfast. There's low levels of educational attainment there, and I think it's so important people get an education because it's a pathway to providing hope and prosperity for people. And I think there's a number of things we don't invest enough in our schools. We have a very segregated society generally. So we have a
yeah,
state school system, and then we have a faith-based system. And I have no problem with people going to faith-based
yeah,
school, but the problem is the structure, the nature of the educational system here is that it is designed to keep people apart, and that's the way it feels. You have to intentionally seek to go into what's called an integrated school, and there's a
yeah,
shortage of those. There just aren't enough spaces. We had a situation recently where there were two schools in Bangor, in County Down, and the parents voted to have these schools to become integrated. So they were state schools, so predominantly for school kids from a Protestant unionist background, but they wanted to be integrated to make it easier for people from a nationalist Catholic background to join that school. And for both schools, the parents voted in favour. The Department of Education officials recommended that both schools become integrated. But unfortunately,
yeah,
the Education Minister, Paul Given, who's a DUP minister, said no.
yeah,
It was taken by judicial review to the High Court here, and unfortunately, the minister's decision was upheld. And I just think
jeez,
it's so important that we bring people together. Um, and there was research that was done some years ago that shows, on the broadest sense, we are paying in the north a segregation tax of 1.5 billion pounds a year. That's because we duplicate so many services. Now you can
yeah,
argue that that's because of we've been through a conflict for 30 years, but we're nearly 30 years on from the Good Friday Agreement, and I just don't think we can afford that inefficiency anymore.
yeah,
So we have duplication of so many different things, but we also have a duplication on the island. So we're paying a partition tax on top of the segregation
on
tax.
top, yeah,
So if we have an integrated approach across the island where we have one justice system, one education system, one healthcare system, and make sure we have the one economy, it will make a huge difference. So just to give one final example on the education system, we have a scenario in the north. They do what are called A levels,
yeah,
which you get those to go into university, um, and in the south they do the leaving certificate.
yeah,
And the problem is, if you're a student in the north, normally people would do three A levels. But if you want to get into university in the south, you either have to do four A levels or you have to do three A levels and what's called an AS level, which is sort of like you do 2 years at senior school, and at the end of the second year, you do your A levels. But at the end of your first year, you do in the north, you do what are called AS levels. It's like half an A level. But you
yeah,
cannot even apply to university in the south unless you've done at least three and a half A levels. Whereas to apply to university in the north or anywhere in Britain, you only need those three A levels. And so it's a barrier. It means that there's
yeah,
huge amounts of people that just can't even apply to universities in the south. And that's creating that division. And what that means is you see increasing amounts of people in the north that there are only two universities in the north, and it can be very difficult to get into those because they're very popular and they're great universities. People
Yeah.
then are having to leave their home, leave their island, leave their friends, family, and go off to Britain. And I
Yeah.
did that myself. My two older brothers did that, but I'm the only one of the three brothers that came back and has lived here permanently. And I have lots of friends that went away to university and never came back. And it's that brain drain. Now, I totally
It
get if
is.
people want to leave because it's
Sure.
their desire, but if they feel they're forced to leave against their desire, that's our future going out the door with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And just hearing the logistical breakdown of the leaving cert versus A levels,
Yeah,
and I have a high school child at home. The amount of planning that it would go in to think about, oh, in 2 or 3 years' time, I may wish to apply in this area, so I better arrange my course load or my certificates or whatever it is in
yeah,
this manner. That requires a great deal of forethought that isn't always, present there as you begin the high school career, and then to know that that could then be closing doors to you along the way without even you knowing it is extremely frustrating and leads to a brain drain in that way.
yeah,
Thanks for that insight. And I think it's a good example of why your book is so helpful and why I'm enjoying it so much in that to try to win the persuasive, like you said, the aspirational, let's achieve this unity goal on an identity level or on a goal or a big idea level. That's a hard push. If we can draw this down specifically to what happens at your kitchen table when you're thinking about colleges and when you're thinking about who your doctor is going to be and when you're thinking about your certifications, all of these things are where we can make a case and say that there's not a level at which this isn't a better idea. And thank you also for hiding the different the additional. You can understand the impact of segregated schools and seeing how when they're how those barriers, but then you add there's like a third layer of the partition schooling system that is
yeah.
quite a complicating factor. That's really helpful.
And I mean, I think it's just like I totally get the desire, the aspiration for uniting Ireland, and I get that on its own. And I've always, as I said, since the Good Friday Agreement, this is not something that just happened to me because of even just because of Brexit. I
Yeah,
first my first book that I wrote back in that I published in 2022, Irish Unity Time to Prepare. I'd come up with the idea in 2012 that I wanted to write that at the time of the London Olympics because
yeah,
even then all the stuff about the London Olympics and saying, "Oh, isn't Britain great?" Even then, in my gut, so it's both my gut, my heart, and my head. I was, this is the way that we should be together as one small island. But yeah, I think the key thing for me is it's about breaking it down because people look at they say Irish unity, it's just this big thing, and I think by breaking it down into sectors, we can address the issues on a case by case basis. Because as you
yeah,
said, we want to avoid the chaos of Brexit. So the best way we can do that is by planning and preparing beforehand. And I think it's not just about demographics. Now, we know that the North was set up as a region to have a permanent unionist and a Protestant majority. It now has neither.
yeah,
And the Catholic population is actually slightly larger than the Protestant
yeah.
one. But demographics on its own is not going to win a United Ireland for
A
us. But
referendum.
they're
Yeah,
they're increasing amount of people in the centre ground, people like me who come from unionist background who are open to this. And I think it's
yeah,
about addressing any fears, concerns people may have by breaking it down and saying, okay, in terms of healthcare, this is how I think this is what the
yeah,
problems are now, and this is how we can make it better. Because across so many metrics, if you look at healthcare, we have the worst waiting lists anywhere compared to the Republic, compared to England, Scotland, or Wales. And, wait times in
yeah,
ER departments, everything you can think of. And Brexit itself creates a real hostile environment. And we are so dependent on immigration for our healthcare staff. And I think it's great. I know people may have genuine concerns about immigration, but I think
mhm,
we can manage that because we need to be able to manage immigration. And again, on a related point, that's where I think having United Ireland, we can manage immigration. We can assure people of their concerns by saying, look, we can manage immigration by our sea and airports, because at the
yeah,
moment we have this scenario where we have two states in the one island. We had a previous Conservative Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who was boasting about the fact that under his Rwanda scheme, you had refugees going through Britain, through the north, in the Republic, and there was nothing that the Republic could do about it. And we know that the far right are trying to sow dissent, both from
take
Britain,
advantage. Yeah,
from
yeah,
America, and some
yeah,
in Ireland itself. But
Yeah.
we need to recognize people's genuine concerns. I think immigration is a good thing, but we need to assure people that we're managing it. And one of the ways we can assure people we're managing it is we get a United Ireland that provides us a much easier way to manage immigration and being able to take our fair share of refugees.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you for that. Yeah, at every level there, I think we say often here in our people's assemblies or in events here, we hope that we can persuade people to recognize that unity is the best way forward, either for the aspirational goals of an identity
Mm.
or for the specific sectoral issues you raise. And more than that, we want everyone who steps into the voting booth to know very well exactly what they're voting for and what they're voting against. There's no mystery. There's no sense of, well, we'll see what happens, like as it did seem as though there were Brexit. So if you hear it all, if people read your book and make the case and say, well, I'm still not convinced, but I have a much better understanding of what I'm voting for, that's a really good place to target as the goal, to increase an understanding of the impacts and ramifications of these things at every level. So, and I'm really grateful for the way your book does that and our conversations helping that. I was lucky enough to attend the launch of your book. It was this in just a couple of weeks ago there in Dublin and the woman who spoke there was none other than President Mary McAleese, who kicked off the event. And she shared a story which I found really interesting. I've thought it stuck with me about I think it was specifically about cancer research labs and how there was a whole lot of people working towards the same goal but not working together, and that lack of collaboration was leading to a slowdown of discovery, and that when barriers were removed, when collaboration was allowed to happen, not only were the questions that they were seeking answers for able to be answered more readily, but a whole host of things were able to come out of that discovery. There's a synergy that was born of the removal of a border that said, wow, we knew these things were going to be better. We didn't know all of these things would be better too. I was fascinated by that metaphor, the way it connected with the question of unity. Is that something you had thought of before, or what do you think? What do you
I,
think of that?
yeah, I hadn't heard that particular example that she gave before, and yeah, I'm incredibly grateful to Dr. Mary McAleese for she wrote the foreword for this book. She
Yeah,
wrote an endorsement for my first book, and I mean, as I said at the time, I'm just some random guy who's written a couple of books. She's the former head of state, and
is right.
she, she did great work with her Building Bridges initiative and
She
really
did.
bringing people together across the island. But I think that's absolutely right. This is it. It's about, I think, diversity is strength. You know, I'm not looking to try and create I don't want us to see a united Ireland that is just a monoculture. I think, you know, you go back to the time of the United Irishmen and Irish women,
Yeah,
and it was about Protestant, Catholic, and dissenter, Wolfe Tone and Henry Joy McCracken, and so on. And I think
yeah,
that's where we can, you know, strength comes through diversity and bringing these different views and thoughts together. And I think we can provide like a pluralist state is what I want to see, and we can bring that together. And we've got the framework of the Good Friday Agreement, and also the European Convention on Human Rights that is embedded in our legislative framework, both north and south. And those are two things that can provide safeguards for everyone who lives across the island, regardless of background. We also have a
yeah,
lot of new Irish, a lot of new people that are coming
yeah,
to the island of Ireland, which I think is great. You know, I feel honoured that people come here because they want to contribute to society and they want to make a contribution and develop and grow their families here. And that's I think that's wonderful. But yeah, I think it's a really good initiative analogy that she came up with, and it's something that
yeah.
is really resonates with me.
Yeah, it was great to hear it. I've thought about it since there. Again, I will plug your book and encourage our viewers and folks to get on, if you're in the States, hop on Barnes and Noble and pick up a copy of that one. Are there other resources you might recommend for people who are eager to get caught up or to learn more about where we are or how we got here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two journalists here, Sam McBride, the editor of the Belfast Telegraph, and Fintan O'Toole, who is a columnist with the Irish Times and other outlets, and they've
Yeah.
just published a book called For and Against a United Ireland. Now, I don't need to
Okay.
tell you the arguments against. I think don't appeal to me, but
Sure.
it's interesting. I know that book is also jumping off the shelves, so I think it shows the interest. There
Yeah.
is a book by Frank Connolly called United Nation, I think, and it's about United Ireland. You've got Brandon O'Leary's book
Yeah.
about United Ireland. and some other books. I also think Nicola Sturgeon's book, the former First Minister of Scotland and the former leader of the SNP, she has just published a memoir called Frankly, and it's really good because it talks about how she used government not only to improve people's quality of life, but also to show how a pathway towards Scottish independence, how that would actually further improve people's lives. So I think that's a great book. And then there's a lady, Claire Mitchell, published a book called The Ghost Limb about the spirit of 98, about United Irishmen and women and how that resonates in this day and age. She comes from a sort of a Protestant background like me, but is very much in favor of United Ireland. So I think there's lots of good books out there, but I think it's podcasts like the webinars like this are really good as well. And there's lots of discussion. It's all just really ramping up in lots of different ways, and I think it's something we need to just continue to discuss. And I would say, sorry, one final thing. John Doyle at the Dublin City University has published a book on the economic the cost of United Ireland, because there have been some erroneous figures saying that it's going to cost 20 billion a year, and that's not credible to my mind. But John Doyle has shown that it's going to be around 2.5 billion a year in year one, and by year 7, we'll be in surplus across the north, and there is that economic benefit that there will be, because the key thing over all this is it's about you add on those 6 counties on the rest of Ireland, it's creating more capacity in terms of economic growth, in terms of educated people, and it's going to create more resilience as well. And I just don't really think you can ignore that. I think there's just so many different ways that we can do better together than we can apart.
Thank you for that. I agree. I'm going to put links to all of those books, or for more information for folks when we archive this and put it up on our YouTube channel, so you can find access to those books and papers as well, so people can find. And I'm here I'm doing this call from Hartford, Connecticut, because I'm happy to report that I'm here in town today to host our latest People's Assembly, and it is our, I think, our 9th or 10th event. Have been in 11 cities coast to coast in America, hosting Irish Unity People's Assemblies, which are focused on a similar vision of education and digging in under the hood, saying, what are our key concerns, questions, and priorities? I'd love to know what you think about Irish America getting involved, Irish nationals in America, Irish diaspora here in the States. Do you have thoughts on the work being done here, or a message for them, or from your perspective, what do you think could be good for them to know?
I think it's hugely important. I published, I recently wrote a paper on why I believe that Irish citizens, not just in the North, but also the diaspora around the world, including in the US, should have the right to vote in the Irish presidential election, because it's the very least that we can do, because you are an extension of the Irish nation that happens to be living in the US. You're as much a citizen as I am in Belfast, as much as a Irish citizen is in Dublin. And I think it's about leveraging those links. I think the Irish America has an absolutely crucial role to play. We've gone from post-conflict to what I would now term as the pre-unity phase. We've got to get the referendums. First, we've got to get the criteria, then we've got to get the referendums, we've got to win those, and then build the new nation. And I think Irish America has an absolutely key role to play. I think that we know that a lot of Irish Americans voted for Donald Trump, and that's something that we can leverage to our benefit, because we want to build as broad a coalition as possible on the island of Ireland for unity. We want to build and grow and maintain a broad coalition in the US as well. And it's great, to have the bipartisan approach. Friends of Ireland caucus you have in Congress is absolutely key, and we want to leverage that, because I know that President Trump is a businessman, and there are a lot of things that are very transactional. But Ireland, I think, is in a really strong place. We invest in all 50 states in the US, and that's something we can leverage. We have lots of cards to play in this, and we can have a grown-up, respectful debate. The US played an absolutely key role in the Good Friday Agreement. It's been the biggest, I would argue, the biggest foreign policy success that the US has had in the last 30, 40 years. And I think I think Irish America and the US more widely can play a key role in securing a united Ireland in the next 5 to 10 years. And that will also be a really positive story, because it's about healing old wounds And I think that's how we bring the nation together. And I think, yeah, so I would just thank everyone in Irish America for your role. I hope that you and like me, I hope that in the next Irish presidential election, I hope we all have a vote.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great. And today here we're waiting for the election
Yeah.
results to come in for it to be finalized, which is a pretty present moment there. Ben, I'm so grateful to you for taking the time. I know you're very busy with a new book. I will plug it one more time and send links to the folks to encourage them to pick up a copy of the Irish Unity Dividend. And is there any final comments or parting words you'd like to share?
Well, I guess just very quickly, just to say, we talked about a number of sectors. We talked about education, economy.
Yeah.
Just to very quickly touch on healthcare, just to bring it back, why this is really important. We know that due to climate change, we're seeing a lot more pandemics. The reason why we're seeing that is we're destroying a lot of natural habitat, a lot of natural vegetation for species. So you're seeing different species are having to live closer together. And that means you're having more zoonotic diseases. So you're seeing diseases jumping from one species to another. And that means we're likely to see, and that leads to more pandemics. We had a scenario during the COVID-19 pandemic where we had two completely different approaches on the island of Ireland happening at one time. And I think the more that we can do to have one single approach, and that's where, United Ireland having an integrated form of governance, we have to plan and prepare before the referendum. But for me, we have to provide that integrated form of governance, and that'll put us in a better position to protect the vulnerable whenever we get more pandemics going forward. And the final comment I would say is, coming from a unionist background, I think the best way we can make our unionist brothers and sisters feel at home is by bringing them into the Irish political mainstream. We had the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party at his party conference saying that unionist TDs in an all-Ireland Dáil could hold the balance of power in forming a government after unity. And I agree with that. And they're going to have much more power in an all-Ireland Dáil than they ever will in the Westminster. Westminster has been a cool house for unionism. There hasn't been a unionist MP from Northern Ireland in the British cabinet, the British government at the highest level for 80 years. So just think about that. We have an opportunity to create a new nation where we can bring everyone from all our different backgrounds together for the benefit of everyone. So I think we've got to work together to achieve it.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that final picture and for the ways in which you have drawn down in great detail the many, many reasons why this is the best way forward. Ben, thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us on the call today. It means a great deal that you take the time to join us and to learn as we do these month by month. Please stay tuned for news about next month's guest and how to sign up for that one, and we'll be in touch soon. And thank you again, Ben. Farewell.
Thank you.
Thank you.